Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Here's another weekly watch list for you guys. So today is Sunday. Tomorrow going into the market, I'm going to go through some of the stocks that I'm watching, overall futures levels that I'm watching. And yeah, we are going into Fed week. So I'm going to go through kind of when we have Fed announcements and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing we want to look at is the economic calendar, obviously, and just looking at the economic calendar, we can see that we have FOMC on Wednesday. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday will be risk off days for me. This means that I'll be more cautious going into the market. I will look for higher probability setups, wait for every confirmation box to be checked, and then I will also be sizing down into FOMC. The reason behind that is usually market tends to chop around prior to the announcement because overall, investors are anticipating the announcement, what could happen, if they're going to raise rates, increase rates, decrease rates, whatever the case may be. Everything is hanging on what FOMC and the Fed members are set to say. Of course, we have Powell speaking at 2:30 as well. So on Wednesday, usually I don't trade prior to FOMC. That's kind of one of my rules. I don't like to trade prior to the announcement. And then when the announcement does happen, I still risk off. So I like to personally wait until after Powell is done speaking. That way, investor market sentiment, you really get an understanding of what's going on at that point. Before that, and from around 2 until 2:30, market is extremely volatile. So if you try to take a play right at 2 o'clock after the announcement without waiting to see what Powell has to say, you can get caught on the wrong side of the play. So you always want to wait until Powell speaks, see what he has to say. Sometimes if he's dovish, market can make a different move. So you really want to wait until he starts speaking. Let investors digest what he has said, what the meeting was about, and then learn to take or look for high probability setups at that point. That being said, on Thursday, we have jobless claims, we have existing home sales. So we have a couple of economic pieces of data coming out on Thursday as well, and then PMI on Friday. So these are the couple of things that you need to be paying attention to going into the market this week. Friday, this comes out at 9:45. So prior to 9:45, you don't want to take a trade. And then everything else, we can see that 10 a.m. on Thursday, we have existing home sales. So prior to 10 a.m., you might want to be cautious. Just looking at this week overall, for me, it's going to be an overall risk off week. I'm going to be way more cautious with my sizing and way more cautious with the plays that I take. I'm going to be a lot less aggressive, and that's what I usually recommend for everyone. Okay, so going to the market this week, I'm going to go through futures, ES, and the NASDAQ, and what I'm looking for potential plays on ES and the NASDAQ. The main play that I have on ES, especially to the downside, is this gap fill. So ES has a gap to fill below 44.94, which was Friday's low, all the way down to around 44.67. So from 44.94, ES could fill the gap to 44.67. So the gap fill to the downside is the highest probability setup that I see on ES futures going into this week. To the upside, you can also see that on the 30-minute. And if we go up to like the 4 hours, sorry, my chart's a little messy just because I have a lot of we can also see on the 30-minute slightly flagging here, so we could get an additional leg down on ES futures to fill the gap. If we hold that gap level at around 44.95, 94 level, ES will bounce back up to 45.20. 4,500 being the level that it needs to break to the upside, back up to 45.20, 45.30, and 45.50 to the upside if we get significant price action this week. If we go ahead and look on the NASDAQ has a little bit of the gap left. So NASDAQ's gap is at around 15,355. It has a little bit of the gap left to fill to 15,330, so about 20 points down. NASDAQ has some of the gap to fill as well. And then below that, NASDAQ has room to 15,300 and 15,240 to the downside. To the upside, I would want to see the NASDAQ clear 15,400 back up with levels at 15,455, 15,500, and then it can go up to around 15,580 and 15,600 if we get significant price action to the upside. So those are the levels that I'll be watching on futures and the plays that I'll be watching on futures. Remember, futures are the leading indicators, so you always want to pay attention to NASDAQ and ES prior to taking any trades in the market. All right, so the first stock that we're going to go through that I have on watch is Tesla. Now, if we look at Tesla on the 3-year weekly time frame, Tesla is still in this channel here. You can see very clean channel on Tesla that it's been holding. So I am watching Tesla for a breakout either to the upside or downside of that channel. That is a long-term play that I'm looking at for Tesla. But overall on the week and over maybe the next 2 weeks, these are the plays that I'm looking at for Tesla. So for Tesla specifically, I'm looking for puts below 260. So we do have a 4-hour and daily trend line here that it's been holding. Sorry, let me go back to the 4 hours. So this is a 4-hour trend line that it's kind of holding. It's also a daily trend line as well on Tesla. For Tesla, I'm looking for puts below 260 for the break of the trend line. Now you could also take it at 270, but it's a little bit aggressive and just waiting for overall market sentiment. Personally, I would wait for the 260. If you take the 270, targets would be 265 and 260. If you wait for the 260 break, targets on Tesla would be 250. Tesla has this wick to fill and then a gap to fill down to 249. So below 260, I have Tesla targets at 250, and then below 250, you have targets of 246, 243, 237, and 235 to the downside on Tesla. It can go all the way down to 220. So if we go ahead and look at the 235 level here on Tesla, after 235 as room down to 230, and then around the 225 and 220 levels on Tesla. That's if we get a significant sell. Like I said, these are weekly / 2-week targets that I usually go through on my Sunday watch list, but 260 down to around 240 is definitely feasible on Tesla over this week. Like I said, if we get bearish sentiment for the trend line break. To the upside, if we hold on Tesla, I'm looking for Tesla calls above 280. 279 was the weekly high from this past week. I usually round up to the next level of resistance or the next psychological level, which would be 280 on Tesla. And above 280, if we zoom out here, Tesla has some room up. Above 280, I have targets of 285, 292, 296, and then 300. So you can see the 299 is the 4-hour high. Like I said, I usually round up, so 300 would be the target, and then above 300, Tesla has levels at 308, 313, and then 315 that it could potentially hit to the upside. So those are the levels that I have on Tesla and the plays that I'll be watching on Tesla. If it does break this trend line, I really do think Tesla could go to the bottom of that channel, which is why I have wider profit targets to the downside on Tesla. Next stock we're going to look at is Meta. So Meta, I actually really like this play as well. Meta broke the 4-hour and daily trend line. So if you can see here, it broke this daily trend line here on Meta, and now it looks like it's potentially retesting that trend line. And if you look at it on the 4-hour and weekly time frames, it's the same concept. So you can see here, broke the weekly trend line, rejecting that trend line here for now. So what I'm looking for, which is the highest probability setup here on Meta, is for it to reject that trend line retest and come back down into around the 274 level on Meta. If it breaks 274, we can get a significant sell and that weekly trend line break on Meta. So for Meta, I'm looking for a rejection of this trend line, which is around the 313 level, which was this week's high. A rejection of the trend line on Meta. I'm looking for puts below 298, which was the weekly low. Below 298, I have targets of 295, 292, 288, 285, and then Meta has the wick to fill to 274. So that is the weekly target that I have on Meta. Like I said, if we get a significant sell over the next 2 weeks, Meta has a target of 274 to the downside. Also, I just want to say that, like I said, these are wider profit targets because I look at it for the week or the next 2 weeks. I do also have separate profit targets throughout the day. These are the main levels that I see the stock hitting, maybe highs of days or lows of days. But I will also have, say for example, if I'm looking to take a scalp on Meta, I'll have little smaller profit targets to the upside or downside if I look to take a scalp. Obviously, if you're scalping, it's going to be a quicker profit target. It's not going to be like a 5-10 point profit target versus day trading or swing trading the stock. We're just watching it overall for the week. So that was Meta to the downside. To the upside, I'm going to look for calls above 305. So 305 on Meta, it has room up to. So For 305, basically I'm looking for it to bounce off of the 300 level. It held around the 300 level. If we go ahead and look at the 5-day 15-minute time frame, you can see that Meta wasn't able to close below the 300. It wicked down to 298.75, but it wasn't able to close below 300. So if we get a bounce at the 300 level, I'm looking for Meta calls above 305 with targets of 313, 315, 318, 323, 326, and then back up to 330. At that point, it would have failed the trend line break, because then it would be back up to the daily high on Meta. Okay, so those are the plays that I'm watching here on Meta. Really significant high probability setup if it does break and reject the trend line to the downside. Okay, next we have is Netflix. Netflix coming off of some news this week. So we did have a nice sell down on Netflix. It was kind of in a consolidation period, and then now it's at the bottom of that consolidation period. So if Netflix does break the bottom of the consolidation period and breaks this daily trend line that I have on it, you can see a really significant sell on Netflix as well. Otherwise, we could potentially bounce back up off of this support level here and the bottom of the consolidation period on Netflix. So either or, both high probability setups here on Netflix. We could potentially see even a double bottom here if it holds around this 395 level. So what I'm looking for Netflix, I'm looking for a bounce, like I said, at 395. It could potentially get a double bottom. I would look for calls above 400 with targets of 405, 410, 413, 420, 427, and 432 on Netflix to the upside if we get a bounce there and it holds the 395 level. Otherwise, if it breaks below 395, I'm looking for targets of 391, 385. Below 385 on Netflix, I have levels at 378, 370, and then at 378 and around the 380 level. If it clears 378 on Netflix, it will break the daily trend line as well. And below that 378, Netflix can sell down to 370, 365, and 360. So bigger profit targets. If it does break the trend line to the downside, we will get a significantly bigger sell to the downside. Otherwise, like I said, if it bounces here, we can get a move all the way back up to around 400 and 440 on Netflix. And then we have, of course, last but not least, we have SPX. So we'll go ahead and look at SPX. SPX, similar to Meta here, broke this daily trend line. Clean breakout of the trend line, clean retest of the trend line, and now it's coming back. It also created a separate trend line here on the daily time frame that is looking to start breaking here. So really, I'm looking for Meta to break that trend line. I'm sorry, not Meta. SPX to break that trend line to the downside. For puts on SPX, I'm going to look for it below the weekly low, which was 44. I'm sorry, not the weekly low. It's like the 10-day low here. It's the 44.30 level here on the 10-day low of SPX. If we clear 44.30 on SPX, I have targets 44.15, 44.05. Below 44.05, it has been holding that level for a few weeks. Below 44.05, we have targets of 43.92, 43.80, 43.55, 43.45, 43.35, and 43.15 on SPX. So usually with SPX, it can move in significant increments, which is why I usually have 100-point targets to the upside and 100 points of targets to the downside, upside or downside on SPX, because it can move in bigger price increments if we do get good price action in the market. So it is feasible for it to move 100 points in a week or in even like 2 days, 3 days, because I have seen it do that. So if you guys are wondering why the profit targets are so wide, it's because it can move in those price increments throughout the week. To the upside on SPX, if we hold this trend line, I'm looking for calls above 44.70 with profit targets of 4,500 to the upside on SPX. And then I have 45.12, 45.30, 45.40, 45.51. It does have a gap to fill above 45.51. Then I have targets of 45.77, 45.88, and 4,600 to the upside on SPX. So Main watch per usual is always going to be SPX and ES futures. That's kind of my go-to to trade. If a stock has a significant catalyst, for example, obviously Netflix this week had some news last week, so going into this week, and then Meta too, just because Meta has a trend line retest and break, it could be a high probability setup as well. Those will be my main watches on the week. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Comment down below if you have any questions on anything, and I will talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.